Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hi, welcome back. Today we radiate forgiveness with my dear friend, Holly Duckworth, who is a fellow level 3 practitioner and psychologist practicing in Durango, Colorado. Holly's been doing this for longer than I have and is trained in other protocols such as Safe and Sound, which is a non-invasive listening therapy. So anyway, we're talking today about Holly's book, Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher Self. All right, Holly, I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back, Christy.
I'm so happy to have you back. Of course, you were on to talk about finding forgiveness, which was your first.
Yes.
Well.
Yes. So we've got Finding Purpose.
Right? That was, sorry, yes, Finding Purpose was the first one.
Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher Self. And then this one is Finding Forgiveness, Surprising Healing from the Higher Self. And can I share a little secret with your listeners? There's a third one on the way.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was going to be a trilogy when I started, but I guess it is. Finding Gratitude, Surprising Growth from the Higher Self is the new one that's underway. But today we're talking about finding forgiveness.
Are you having a hard time keeping all the titles straight?
Yeah, a little bit. Doing this, like they're given to me. Right? I mean, this is all just dropped in. All I do is sit in front of the computer and listen theoretically and type. And so not only did I not know that there were 3 books when I started, but I also didn't know what the titles were. So.
Hey, that's on a need to know basis, Holly.
Right.
When you need to know.
Right.
Oh, Finding Forgiveness. Did you have any surprises in this book?
I did. So one of the things that wasn't surprising was this connection between healing and forgiveness. And I'm sure you see it in your QHHT sessions so many times. Like it will come in, I mean, maybe it's physical healing, maybe it's emotional healing, all different kinds of healing, but let's just say physical healing even. A lot of times the higher self in a QHHT session will say for some sort of physical healing, they'll tell the person, well, she needs to forgive so-and-so for that situation in order to release the fibromyalgia or the rheumatoid arthritis or the whatever.
Right.
Like there's this link between a physical experience and holding on to some sort of traumatic situation, right?
I find this is always the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that part wasn't surprising because I had seen that over and over and over again in QHHT sessions, this link between forgiveness and healing. What I didn't understand, what was surprising is because we all know forgiveness is important. We all know how it feels to forgive and how good it feels, but nobody tells you how to forgive. What do you just say? I forgive you. And then that's it. It's that easy.
I think there has to be a wand in there or something. And,
Yeah. So when I started receiving the information for the book, they delineated, they being the higher self, delineated 4 specific steps. Okay. So 4 actions that need to take place. So the first is see, and then accept, and then release. And then the last step was super surprising to me because I thought we were done with see, accept, release. The last step is move. Okay. So see, so let's say that there was some sort of traumatic situation. Maybe someone betrayed someone else, let's say, and we're trying to forgive this situation. I'm trying to forgive the person that betrayed me. It's a very common situation to require forgiveness for. So seeing means seeing that betrayal situation from all sides. So from the other person's side, from the higher self perspective, from maybe the adult you experience and the child you experience, all of the different perspectives, the bystander's perspective, the other people in the relationship's perspective. So C is seeing this betrayal situation from all perspectives, even the higher perspective. Accept is then realizing, it's almost this parsing of realizing, accepting the situation exactly for what it was in the past. So not wishing it was different, not regretting, not thinking you wished you had done something different or the other person had done something different, but accepting the situation exactly as it exists, but also recognizing that you're accepting it as having happened, past tense. It's gone. It was back there. I've seen it from all perspectives. And now I'm accepting it for that bundle of exactly what happened back then. Okay. But also accepting then that the hurt and the anger and the pain and the suffering still exists in the now. So it's the separating of the happened of what happened and allowing it to just be in the past. And then also accepting the current pain and suffering and situation, the emotions in the present, the trauma energy in the present that still needs healed. Okay. So we can accept both of those things. They can both be true. Okay. So that's accept. Accept what happened, and accept the hurt as it exists now. So C, accept. Then the third is release. So now that we've seen and we've accepted the situation for what it is, but now we're only working now on this trauma energy that exists in the now. And so now we can release that trauma energy. Okay, now we can release the energetic situation. It's almost like alchemy. And there's a lot of spiritual move forward in the release phase of asking for help from guides, asking for help from on high, and then being in that state of allowing the release. So a lot of times we'll white knuckle grip on that hurt and that pain because who am I without it, especially if I've had it for a really long time. And so then this is a little bit of that coming to that recognition that I can now release my grip on that pain and suffering. That pain and suffering is hurting no one but me. It's not affecting anyone else. And so that's the release step. It's that working with that energy, that emotional energy that exists in the now. So see, accept, release. And then the last step, which was the big surprise for me, because I'm like, well, we're done. We're forgiven. Yay. No. It's important to move forward. So now that you are in a healed state, well, what's next? There's new lessons, there's new experiences, there's new areas of focus. And if you don't actively engage yourself with the intention of moving forward, then we can unheal ourselves. We can go back into that unhealed state. And so it's critically important to then, once that energetic shift is made, is to have a new area of focus for your energy, for your intentions. And so move then becomes an important fourth step. So see, accept, release, and move. That's how you forgive.
Let's circle back to the release. Did they give any advice, best practices on how to?
I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like to ask you a few simple favors. First of all, please rate, review, and share this podcast wherever you're listening. It sounds like a simple little thing, and it is, but it has a huge impact for us because it helps other people find us in the podcasting algorithms. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it helps a lot. Next, if you would subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe or follow, and that helps you and it helps us. It helps you because then you receive notifications when we have a new episode that's out. It helps us because, again, algorithm magic, I don't know what happens, but it helps. And then finally, you can support our podcast in a tangible way by going to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast and then click on Support the Show. Now, we have a new feature too. We are now on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. You can also find the link to Patreon when you go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast. So on Patreon, for $3 a month or $5 a month, you can support your metaphysical and spiritual growth. You can learn about upcoming guests, and you can get early and ad-free versions of the shows. So please support us. This podcast is free for you to listen, but we have costs, and quite frankly, they come out of my pocket. So if you like this content, if you get a lot out of it, please see what you can do to give back. Thank you so much.
So there's kind of two phases, and this is really true, I think, in all forgiveness. When we go into this, a truly healed state, there is an ego part and a higher self part. So the ego and the higher self are working together integratively, symbiotically. I know you've heard me say this, Christy, but I hate that term ego death, because we incarnated as a human on purpose. We wanted the human experience, which meant we were going to have the ego experience, right? And so to just discount the ego's role in things like, oh, I don't want my ego to be, that's, you're missing the point of being the human, right?
Exactly.
So the ego part of release is this not hanging on, of actively being engaged in releasing your hold on your own pain. And that can be scary for some people. Some people identify so closely with their own pain and suffering that releasing their pain and suffering becomes very hard. And so a big part of the ego aspect of release is recognizing, becoming aware of where you're hanging on to that pain and suffering, and then making the conscious decision to let go of that. Okay. Now, then there's also the energetic side, the spiritual side of release. And that, the advice from the higher self is, ask for help. We're here. But the human experience is an experience of free will. And so unless you ask for help, they can't help you. But the minute you ask for help from your spirit guides, from your guidance, from your higher self, boom, they can do all sorts of transmutations for you. And so then the spiritual side of that is then allowing and trusting the higher self to transmute that trauma energy into spiritual growth, and with the ability then to move forward. So there's kind of two parts. And there's two parts to all of the steps. There's the ego part and the higher self's part to all of those, to forgiveness in general.
Yeah. Oh, can you speak a bit as to move from the ego perspective and the higher self perspective?
Yeah. So from the ego side of move, it's like, have a focus. So many people, so let's say the betrayal side. Let's say that, someone was madly in love with a partner. Maybe they were even married for a long time, and then the partner betrayed them, and we're working on forgiveness. And so some people might get so caught into and so identified with that trauma energy, that betrayal energy, their own pain and suffering. For example, like just a simple example, they're so white knuckle gripped on that hurt that their prior partner caused, they don't seek future relationships, right? And so a silly example might be in that betrayal situation on the ego side is, go sign up for a dating app, go out on a date, get out there, move, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that the date might be nothing but a cup of coffee, but the symbology to yourself of I'm moving forward, open to relationship is huge in the forgiveness process. Okay. So that's the ego side. And then the spiritual side might be recognizing and really beginning to integrate that betrayal was a really important part of your soul growth. You asked for it. You and that partner that betrayed you came into this incarnation understanding that you were going to give each other this wonderful lesson. And yet, from a higher self standpoint, you're going to still trust, even in light of the betrayal experience. And this betrayal experience taught you new things about trust. And so moving forward, understanding the higher perspective of that betrayal and how it created soul growth is the higher self side of move forward.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Just as a thought experiment, how would you see the C part of it from the ego versus the higher self?
Yeah. So the ego's part of seeing is quite literally stepping into this pretty basic understanding of, well, your story's only your story. There were lots of other stories going on, right? And so maybe just continuing on with this betrayal example, but maybe you weren't very attentive to your partner. Maybe you really weren't listening. Maybe you were checked out already. Maybe the betrayal was a response to some childhood trauma that you were carrying forward that you actually had a responsibility to heal and you didn't, when you knew that, right, at a certain level. And so it's really a lot of that introspection of what was my part in this, because it takes two to tango, right? So it's just that introspection, that ruminating, that introspection, that seeing things in terms of owning up to, we always have a part in what happens when we're in relationship like that. And then the higher self perspective is beginning to see this as one experience in the span of eternity, right? And yeah, there's hurt and there's pain, and it was a challenging experience. But when you begin to think about all of the experiences that your soul has experienced and all of the incarnations that your soul has experienced, then you can begin to see it as just kind of, it's not necessarily as blown out of proportion. You can kind of put it back into proportion when you see it from this eternal perspective. And then the accept, because I know you're going to go there from the ego and the higher self. Yeah. So the accept is this recognizing, as humans, we are attached to time, right? As higher self is an eternal aspect of us. And so it's timeless. And so the time aspect of this really recognizing that, yes, yea, verily, that happened in the past. Okay. That's not now. That's then. That's the ego part. That's the ego work to do. But then also accepting, really diving into those feelings, really exploring, allowing yourself to immerse yourself into like accepting the pain and hurt and all of those emotions. Again, that's one of the reasons why we come into a human incarnation, is to feel the feelings.
Right.
It's not denying the feelings, accepting the feelings. That's kind of more of the higher self side of the accept.
This sounds very similar to what the higher self says in some of my sessions about just overcoming trauma and overcoming moving emotion through the body. First, you've got to acknowledge that this is what I'm feeling. Then you've got to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can move it, because we
Mm-hmm.
try to skip right to the just moving it out of the body, and that doesn't work. So this
Right.
sounds very similar. Now, what about self-forgiveness? Because I
Yeah.
know we all have a struggle with that.
So in every single solitary situation, these 4 steps, we're always applying that. We're applying it 3 ways. So 1, always extending forgiveness to the other party, always receiving forgiveness from the other party. Okay. And then always forgiving ourselves for any harm that we created for ourselves in this. So even in the betrayal situation, the example that we're talking about, in all of these, see, accept, release, and move, in all of those ways, I am not only asking for forgiveness from my partner that betrayed me, I'm asking for forgiveness from them because I recognize that I was party to the situation as well. Okay. I'm extending forgiveness to them. I forgive you. And then, and probably most importantly, I'm going to forgive myself for any harm that I caused myself through this betrayal experience.
I would imagine that would be the same, even if it's like all the damage was internal damage. Like I inadvertently said a really boneheaded thing to a friend, and it caused a huge rift.
Mhm.
And so I find myself struggling with forgiveness around that, but I can apply those steps. Say, forgive myself for making such a silly, boneheaded error and the
Right.
damage I caused myself into this other person.
Right.
Have to include ourselves not only in the part that we play with another person, but the part that we play within ourselves too.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And that's where all the pain and suffering resides. On your example, saying something unkind to a dear friend, we don't necessarily know that that affected them at all, even though it's affecting us greatly.
that's
You
true.
know, that's a great example of how all of the pain and suffering is in here. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I think we are our own worst enemies in some ways, right? And need to extend that olive branch to ourselves as well. Yeah. Was there anything else that came up in these sessions, these forgiveness sessions, that you think is worth mentioning?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in the book, in both books, is I include a whole lot of QHHT session segments. And of course, in this book, specific to forgiveness. And the other thing that comes out, so this is interesting for those people interested in QHHT, one of the things we often do in QHHT is we heal across incarnations, right? So often, well, I don't know about often, but not infrequently, our physical situations in this incarnation can actually be residual energy from another incarnation. And so as we're going through forgiveness, sometimes the forgiveness is for someone that we don't even know because they're in another incarnation. And so that's kind of a little bit of a mind twist of trying to understand how a situation might be from another incarnation might be causing pain in this incarnation. And so one of the stories, one of the QHHT session segments that I talk about in Finding Forgiveness is I had this client, a very unusual situation, and she had every surgery imaginable on her arm. Okay. When she was 5, the arm was severely burned and she had to have skin grafts. When she was a teenager, she had bone cancer in part of that arm and had to have, like, I don't know what this bone is called, but she had to have part of it removed. And so she had a big metal plate. As a further adult, she had to have something happened to her elbow. I don't know, she broke it or something. And anyway, she had to have like plates and pins put in her. She had to have she had a locked shoulder. She had to have shoulder surgery. So she just had this bizarre situation going on with her right arm.
Wow.
And of course, that was her main, QHHT question was, what the heck is going on here? And can you heal it? And so we get into the QHHT session, and what we find out, there's this weird multi-generational incarnation thing going on. And so I'm going to call, I don't remember, I change all the names so that it's completely anonymous in the book. I don't even remember what name I used for this woman, but let's say her name's Shirley and her mom's name is Olivia. And so Olivia's father, so Shirley's grandfather, was in World War II and had some sort in part of the war. He basically had his arm blown off. He had the same arm, the right arm. He had the same arm severely disfigured in the war. War gets over and Olivia is just a little girl. Olivia is like 5. And so the father comes back from war. He's disfigured, but he's still got to go work and do things. And so it was the situation where even after the war, Olivia's father comes back. Now he's disfigured, but he still has to go off to get work. So the last time Olivia sees her father, she's 5 or 6, I think. And the father's leaving on the train and they're saying goodbye and the baby's crying and, it's terrible. And it ends up the father dies on that trip going to a different state for work. So basically Olivia loses her father at a very, very, very young age. Well, the father reincarnates now as Shirley.
Wow.
Intentionally to have the damage on the arm to basically go to Olivia, wink, wink, I'm really your grandfather, and I want Olivia to have this new experience with my soul as her daughter.
You want Shirley to have that.
Well, Shirley is the child, okay, in this life. Well, I mean, she's an adult when she's in my office. But so Shirley is born with this disfigured arm, has all these arm problems, as a nod to Olivia, Shirley's mother, the disfigured man's daughter that he had to leave at a very, very early age to go, wink, wink, we're going to have more of this incarnation. We get to have more of this relationship, which of course, nobody understands this from a human standpoint, right? So the higher self puts all this together like, oh, we're going to do this. This is going to be this is a cool plan. But what it created was like a whole lot of pain and suffering for Shirley in this life. because she had to go through all these surgeries and all of this physical pain with her arm.
Right.
Presumably just for a wink, wink at Olivia. It's like, okay. Yeah, not a good plan. Guys, not a good plan. Stop it. Cut it out.
Understand that all of these things really are divine plan.
Yes.
They seem so elaborate, but it's really nothing for the higher self.
Exactly. Exactly. And here's this 50-year-old woman in my office having had, I don't even know, dozens of surgeries over her life in excruciating pain over and over, physical pain over and over and over again. So we get into the healing and find all this out. We get into the session, into the hypnosis, find all this out, unravel all of this multi-generational incarnation pretzel twist. And the higher self says there's not much they can do for the arm because there's nothing left. They're seeing all of this metal and they're like, the higher self literally said, there's no life left in there. There's nothing to repair. We'll do what we can for the pain, but we can't, there's not enough left in there. There's not enough life force left in there to do it. So the session does a 90-degree turn into now realizing what a terrible idea this was. And forgiving at the spiritual level, right?
Wow.
Like forgiving the higher self, basically, forgiving the soul for putting poor Shirley through all of this pain and suffering. And so it's just this kind of this, who we're in forgiveness with is not necessarily even another person. It may be another person, but someone from another incarnation that we don't even know about. And it may even be we're forgiving our soul for what it's brought us.
And yet, for Shirley, she gets so much learning. I mean, and the pain and suffering in the scheme of things is less than a grain of sand. It's less than a drop of water in the whole ocean.
Yes. And I'm sure karmically, she's going to have a lavish life at some point in time to balance out all the pain and suffering. But still, we can be in that state of forgiveness of going, oh, this really wasn't a very good idea. And truly, all it was a wink, wink at Olivia to go, I'm your dad. And we get to have this relationship. And it was like, yeah, we can forgive that. We can do an oopsie and go, okay, let's process some forgiveness for that.
That's a really good point. And we'll have lifetimes where we are a slave owner, where we have tortured people, where we have beaten people, and then we're paying for it, but we're suffering the karma of it in the current lifetime too. And I've had this happen where we need to go back and forgive a previous incarnation.
Yes, we've all been the victim, the villain, the bystander, the savior. We've all been all of those roles. Yeah. So, which then brings us to then this forgiveness, surprising healing. Well, we can just live in a state of forgiveness.
Ooh.
I mean, that's kind of the ultimate goal, is to just not hang on to any of that, allow the pain and suffering to accept it and release it and accept it and release it and accept it and release it and accept it and release it, and just live in the state of that, not holding on to pain and suffering, and then therefore live in a state of forgiveness.
That sounds wonderful. And I keep hearing about it. We hear about ascension all the time, moving into 5D reality, and that when we are in 5D reality, it's all love, it's all joy. And when we are and I would say forgiveness as well.
Yes.
And when we're in these states all the time, then we say that we are in that 5D reality. Right?
Yes.
And we're all striving to do that.
Yeah. And for a lot of us in our human incarnations, no one's ever taught us how to forgive. And so start small. Start practicing the 4 steps on the dude that cut you off on the freeway. Start practicing the steps on the person that fumbled in front of you in the grocery store line or made some mistakes there or whatever. And so the more we exercise that forgiveness muscle, then we can get better and better until we are living in that state of forgiveness.
I agree. Yeah, there's so much to forgive around. So much to forgive around us, right? Even people in the news, people in government, people in public eye, forgiving them.
And one of the things I love to study, Christy, is the original Aramaic meaning or Greek meaning of the Bible. or Hebrew. So the words in the Bible were originally written in Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, right? Not English.
Right. Yeah.
And so when you really start studying the original language, you go, oh, that we really misinterpreted that when we translated it into English. And one of the words that I love is the word sin. Okay, sin. And if you go back to the original Aramaic, where it was introduced, this word sin, into the Bible, it was a term in archery. It was an archery term, and it meant missing the bullseye. When you sinned, you did the bow and arrow, it just meant people would say, sin, you didn't hit the bullseye, sin. Okay, that's it. That's all it means. And we've just like glommed on all of this heaviness to it. And all it means is you didn't hit the bullseye.
Wow. In the four agreements, which I'm looking at, I've got a wall hanging here in my office. The four agreements, the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Impeccable comes from the Latin term peche, or the, I guess, French term peche, to sin, but it means just to speak against somebody. So missing the mark when you're speaking with somebody. So be impeccable with your word. Don't use your word to sin. Don't use your word against other people, right?
Yeah.
We make this a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
Yes. And we're human beings. We're 97% chimpanzee. Of course, we're not going to hit the bullseye every time. Duh.
Well, how do we learn unless we miss the bullseye? A calm sea does not make a good sailor. Gotta mess up every once in a while. How are you going to grow?
Right. So if you're sitting around, if you're listening to this, you're sitting around going, I don't know if I have any forgiveness to process.
Yeah, boo. Yeah, boo, you do. Just open your eyes.
Made mistakes.
Yeah,
forgive yourself for those.
Oh my gosh. As adults and teachers and parents, we're always telling children, say you're sorry for hitting your sister. So that is not, well, first of all, expressing this remorse, but how do you forgive that when it's not sincere? I mean, it's like you said that we're not taught to do this. We're taught wrong to do this.
Yes.
Ways that are not healthy.
Yes.
Yeah. Did it ever come out in your sessions? Like going back to my example, if I do something against somebody, if I am not impeccable with my word, if I use my word or something that I cut somebody off in traffic, I mean, is it even worth going back and saying, I'm sorry, I regret it? Like looking at the flip side of the coin in a way.
Yeah. I think absolutely. It might not be where you start. It might be a little more advanced, but you can definitely sit in your meditation or sit in your prayer, and you can say, from a C standpoint, I'm flawed. I'm 97% chimpanzee. I know I've made lots of mistakes, and I can see that because I'm just an animal here walking around on the face of the earth trying to find food and shelter. So that's C, and you can accept and say, okay, what happened, and now I want to move forward in a different state, in a different level of awareness. And then you can just say, ask for help. Come and help me. Come and wash any sort of pain and suffering that I'm holding on to. Help me wash it away. And then also in your prayers and meditation, where do I focus next? Now in this new released and healed state, what can I give? What service can I provide? What purpose can I provide to the world? And you can just do this in general without a situation or a person or a topic heavy on your mind. You can just do this in general.
That's so true. I mean, it's Ho'oponopono.
Yes, it is.
And when we acknowledge that we've hurt somebody, when we acknowledge, like, for example, the mom who says, tell your sister you're sorry for hitting her. Like, how would we even go about asking for that forgiveness, expressing our own sorrow for something that we've done either purposefully or unpurposefully? Just expressing that I'm sorry. I regret this happened. That was boneheaded. Right.
We were just talking about a lot of the forgiveness is self-forgiveness. And a lot of this is internal work. And so the minute, what actually is going on in that, tell your sister you're sorry for hitting her, this inauthenticity or this surface level statement of forgiveness without the healing. And so all of this work is internal, right? The people you're forgiving don't even have to be alive. They don't even have to be in your life, and yet complete and total forgiveness can be processed. The benefit then, the shift, the healing that happens in relationship, perhaps with those people, is your healing. Now, when you show up again to that relationship in that healed state, everything about that relationship has changed, right? I mean, so think about it, going back to that maybe spousal betrayal example. That person's off living their life, doing their thing. You're still hanging on to your pain and suffering. You decide to do your forgiveness. It's all internal work. And now you show up to that person who may randomly show up in your life or may intentionally, maybe you share kids or something like that or whatever. You're going to see that person at the next birthday party or whatever. You show up in a healed state, like an authentically healed state through the forgiveness. The entire relationship changes. That other person is going to look at you and go, whoa, what happened to you? Because you're not holding on to that pain and suffering anymore. And you're going to show up. It's going to be a brand new relationship with that person, which is going to be drastically different than the old relationship with that person.
Yeah.
But if you're just, oh, I forgive Bob for, having an affair with Sue or whatever, and you're just saying that, but you're still really unhealed on the inside, then that relationship with Bob is still going to be icky at the birthday party. You can pretend to be polite and pretend to be kind, but the energy of that relationship has not shifted because you have not done your healing. The minute you authentically do your healing is the minute that entire relationship changes to a new one.
I agree. And I see that in sessions many times. People come in to resolve an issue in their session, and then without really even saying anything or doing anything with the people in their lives, that relationship shifts, right? So it creates that ripple effect, that radiating effect, to borrow this podcast.
Yeah.
It radiates out. Matt Kahn talks about when you heal something within yourself, it heals it in the community around you. I mean,
Yes.
again, I keep gesturing over here I've got a hanging on the wall of Ho'oponopono. This is Ho'oponopono. If you asked the shamanic psychologist in Hawaii who was practicing Ho'oponopono with the prison population, you asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm cleaning the part of me that I share with others because we're so connected.
Yeah.
Right? So when you heal that in yourself, it does radiate out. It does circulate out. I tell my clients that forgiveness, the ultimate end result of forgiveness, is that when you think about whatever happened, it doesn't cause you pain.
Exactly. And you might have even forgotten about it.
Right.
You might have even forgotten about, wait, why haven't I called, that person in so long? I don't even remember why. Well, that's a sign of healing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is my working definition of forgiveness is when you think of it, it doesn't cause you pain. What is your kind of standard response about what forgiveness is?
Yeah, it is being healed. There's that link again, that the way to healing is forgiveness. Those two things are inextricably linked. And so then forgiveness means that you are in a healed state.
I love that. And then, I also have people telling me all the time, but Christy, you don't know what this person did to me.
Right.
How do I forgive that?
Right. Right. So one of the things that I talk about in the book is that, what might be a corollary? I can't remember exactly the example I used in the book, but there is a time and a place for healing. When you're in the middle of, like, let's say, going back to Bob and Sue and the betrayal situation. When you're reading the email, when you're first finding out that Bob and Sue have this thing going on in your marriage and you're being betrayed, that might not be the moment to pull on forgiveness. And so it goes back to, we're having these experiences, these challenging experiences for a reason, the reason being soul growth. And so it's okay to allow the anger, the hurt, all of the emotions, the betrayal, the sadness. Go cry, go hit a pillow, go call a friend and just vent and complain over and over again. Let that happen. Let that happen. And then when you're ready, when you're sick of yourself being in that pained state, then we step on the forgiveness path. So there's a time and a place for the forgiveness. And it's okay to be in an unhealed state because growth is happening through that for a little while.
Yeah. Right. The problem comes when we get stuck in it.
Yes. Yes. And so it's okay to say, but you don't know what he did to me. Maybe that it's so fresh and so raw that that person they really do need to absorb that suffering, absorb that pain, have that experience. And, that's another thing kind of in our society, we kind of want to like instantly heal and push that away and never have the hurt and the pain. But there's a place for that. And it's okay to hold space for your friends, hold space for yourself when they're in an unhealed state. That's grace.
Yeah, that is grace. It is
Yeah.
high grace. Wow. Where can people get your book, Finding Forgiveness?
So Finding Forgiveness, Surprising Healing from the Higher Self. It's in all the ways on Amazon. So paperback on Amazon.com. You can get the ebook on Kindle, and the audiobook is available on Audible.
Do you narrate the audiobook?
I do narrate the audiobook. And right now on my website, awarecaredurango.com, you can get both books with an autograph from me cheaper than Amazon. So if you go to awarecaredurango.com and shop, you'll see both books for, I can't remember what the price is now. I think it's $17, and autographed by me, which is actually cheaper than if you bought the books on Amazon.
What a great deal. When is your next book, Finding Gratitude, going to be out?
I've got time carved out in August and September for the it's outlined, it's drafted, but I still have a whole lot of work to do on that. And that one is just to remind everybody, finding gratitude, surprising growth. So there's this link when we talk about growth of what's the secret there? It's gratitude. It's gratitude.
I fully believe that. Growth is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Attitude is its corollary. That is beautiful. Holly, thank you so much for making this work today and getting together and talking to me.
Yeah, we got to do it more often.
I know. You're one of my favorite Leos. Well, we will definitely do this again when Finding Gratitude is out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don't know what to watch next? Decisions. Well, we've got some suggestions. You can click this little video here and watch that. It's something that we think you're going to like. If you like the last one, you're going to like that one too. You can also click on the subscribe button. And if you do that, then you'll get notifications whenever we have a new video up. Win-win, right?